The question that underpins all of this is, why do you want the police to reveal more about the background of suspects? 0345 60 60973. Or, of course, why don't you want the police to be compelled to reveal more information about the background of suspects? That simple distinction between people who think it will cause more violence and people who think releasing the actual facts and figures will reduce the likelihood of violence. Who's going to win their bet?
I think that you labour under a very positive misapprehension, which is that facts are good at changing people's opinions. Yeah. And from Goebbels to Professor Sam Vessier, currently a Canadian professor, all the evidence says that facts are pretty useless.
It's not all the evidence, is it?
No, lots of evidence.
Yeah, there is lots of evidence. But if we're going to be doing fact policing, I think we should start with a little bit of low level fact. It's not all the evidence, and it's not just me either. I'm more interested in what is motivating Yvette Cooper and David Gork and Keir Starmer and Dominic Grieve and others.
Well, it may well be an effort for them, as you indicate, to fight back. But I'm just saying that it won't matter if it shows that most perpetrators are white British. It won't have any effect because people won't suddenly stop being racist because they hear a few facts. In fact, in Mein Kampf, Hitler wrote that if you want to dominate as a political party, you need people to believe in an article of faith rather than on evidence, because evidence can be challenged.
But then we just give up and go home. How do you fight what you're describing, or how do you challenge what you're describing, and how do you deal with the people who, for example, are very, very loud on the subject of the ethnicity of suspects should be revealed, but the actual convictions of parliamentary candidates for violence against British women shouldn't be shared until a newspaper gets hold of the story and reveals it long after that person has arrived in Parliament as a colleague of Nigel Farage. So how do you address that level of epic hypocrisy and dishonesty?
To a certain extent, you have to take a leaf out of their playbook. And if I can give you an example of what I mean. About 25 years ago, a professor, I think at University of Wisconsin, but I may be wrong,
yes,
he was a big advocate against capital punishment. And after years of trying to make the arguments and getting nowhere, he decided to round up a load of people who'd been exonerated on death row. And he took them around theatres and put them on stage, telling their story of how they would be dead now, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And this became super successful. In fact, so much so it went around the world and they ran out of death row people, so they had to use actors in the end. And it had the biggest impact on moratoria on capital punishment in American states of anything that's ever been done. But it was appealing to people's emotions.
Because they were stories. It was stories, not data.
Exactly. Correct.
And I don't know what those stories look like, but you need a counter-narrative of positivity. The refugees who've gone on to be doctors or who've gone on to be successful entrepreneurs or who have gone on to be care workers and teachers and taxi drivers and just helping keep the fabric of our society ticking happily along. But you're not going to get much news coverage of those people, are you? While the news coverage of the tiny minority who do bad things not only dwarfs the massive majority who don't, but also is disproportionately reported compared to people born here being accused of or committing identical crimes.
Correct. And in fact, if you demonstrated that most perpetrators are white, the right would just change the narrative anyway.
Which is a point that Harley picks up. The elements of the right wing will still kick off as soon as a migrant commits a crime, even if the first 20 or the first 200 to commit the same crime have been British born or are white. Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer and David Gork and Dominic Grieve may mean well, but they are being horribly naive by thinking that the facts can quell these sorts of feelings. I hope Andrew's wrong, but that's why I'm torn on this, because I think we've established the parameters of the debate, and I don't know which horse is going to win. I don't know what horse I'd put my money on. Recent events have taught us to put the money on the dangerous racist liars because they keep winning.
I'd like to think that the facts would win out, and that if used responsibly, that would win people over. But I think from experience, from what we've seen, that that won't happen, that selective stats will be used, as they're always used, to push agendas. I mean, at the moment, we don't see, for example, the press, the media. There's a lot to answer for the media, but they don't go to airports. They don't look at the stats of everybody coming in, migrating to the country who isn't in a boat. So there's already...
You mean over 96%
exactly
of the people coming
Exactly
in.
that, yes. The vast majority they have no interest in. So they look at the minority and they push that agenda and they push that story and they push it out of proportion to make a story, to make sensationalism, because they need to sell papers. So if we give them more stats, will they not use them for the same thing?
Well, I mean, you've almost teed this up perfectly, because we talked yesterday about the YouGov polling showing that 96%, 4% dichotomy that I just referred to, or distinction. The Daily Mail gets its hands on the same story today and opens with the headline, 45% of Britain's back end to immigration, and then goes in on nearly half of voters support ending immigration and deporting those who arrived in the UK in recent years, a poll has shown, and then gives you the percentage of Britons who back this scenario where no new migrants are arrived. And then you're in paragraph 3, alongside the headline, where 86% of Reform UK voters and 27% of Labour and Liberal Democrats backed this. And then in paragraph 5, you get this slightly confusing paragraph. But the YouGov research suggested there was a common misconception about immigration in Britain, as 47% of respondents thought there were more migrants in the UK illegally than legally. Do you know what doesn't appear in this entire article, all 10 or 11 paragraphs of it, is that percentage, that 4%, 96% dichotomy. So you could actually read that story, and how many people read things closely, and not come away understanding just how great the gulf is between reality and perception. In fact, if you're part of the deluded, if you're part of the misled, if you're among the half of voters supporting ending immigration and deporting those who arrived in the UK, you could come away from that article feeling vindicated without knowing that you've just been sold a box full of bricks.
And I think the problem there is that at the moment the government is not very good at getting its messaging out properly, really trying to target those people and just say, look, here is, or at least here is a massive source of information. Go and look for yourself if you've got the time and the inclination. But if not, here's an alternative view for you to consider. Here are the stats.
And it's a bleak analysis, because the government is potentially betting the house on this, and they could end up making everything worse.
Absolutely. And it's not helped, once again, by individuals like Nigel Farage, who are constantly platformed without challenge on media stations, left, right and centre. You could at least, with these stats available, presenters could, in real time, fact-check Nigel Farage and others.
Well, that's a positive. But then it depends on presenters actually using the statistics responsibly and in the public interest.
And that's the point. All of this comes down to responsibility. And I don't think we've seen enough responsibility from the people who should be using these numbers.
Well, the Daily Mail is doing your work for you here by taking the numbers and presenting them in such a way that makes it impossible to see the true scale of the problem. And absolutely absent from this article is the from the print version that I've got in front of me is that idea that the reality is 4%, and nearly half of voters think the reality is in excess, in some cases well in excess of 50%. So in that crucible of misinformation and gaslighting, what will these statistics do, or what will this information do? The background of suspects. 100 people commit a crime. How confident are you that they will all receive equal coverage? Or will the 1 in 100, will the 1% of the problem, who is either foreign-born or even an asylum seeker, will they be a bandwagon upon which all the usual suspects jump in the hope of provoking more violence on our streets?
Background, I spent the last week stood between protesters and counter-protesters trying to de-escalate situations.
Gosh.
And I've been told I don't care about the facts. I just, I don't want them here.
Yeah.
I don't care anything. I just don't want them here. And you think, well, how, the facts ought to help, but they don't.
Well, not with them, but remember the people on the streets, and I mean, sadly, they're coming pretty close to getting public support now from people in traditional media. In fact, the woman locked up for inciting or trying to start pogroms does get championship hero status among some members of the traditional media. But you're describing an extremity. There must be some people, if you look at the statistics from yesterday, they believe things that are simply not true. So if they can be shown the truth, then their opinions will change. Not the people you're describing.
Yeah, but the people I'm describing were there with people who would describe themselves as concerned locals.
Yes.
Who may be concerned locals, but quite a lot of them are still sort of displaying what I would sort of call casual racism.
And more concerned about, in the case of Epping and Ongar, which isn't what you're referring to, more concerned about one incident, than they were about the other 1,310 incidents that happened in the same territory. It doesn't dilute their concern, it just makes it disproportionate.
That's absolutely right. And what we need, what we really need is a careful deprogramming policy. So let's call them concerned citizens. We're using language that is totally weaponised. They're calling undocumented, illegal, fighting-age men.
Yeah, invaders is a word that seems to have crossed the Rubicon now from being completely unacceptable to being acceptable.
Yeah, that one wasn't used yet.
Right.
But people who would not consider themselves slightly racist, we're using those words. Illegal when they clearly can't be illegal.
I mean, I don't know.
Undocumented when, by definition, they're in the system, so they are documented.
And their applications are overwhelmingly approved, which can't be done without information. And it's not going to be a perfect system, but the idea that you just get way through without proving your case is palpably ridiculous. And we also know that people, again, because of yesterday's polling, yesterday's research, people, even when they're talking about illegals, have got a completely warped idea about how big that problem is. So just because the facts haven't worked yet doesn't mean they'll never work, does it?
No, but not without the deprogramming. You've got to work with it, and it's been implanted in people for so long. It's a big job to unpick.
So in the context of the short term, there's a great piece in the Times today by Daniel Finkelstein about the dangers of the short term, but he's writing about the Online Safety Act. He's not writing about this issue. He's just sort of reminding readers that the idea that you can judge a policy on day one or day two is really dangerous. But we live in the short term. We look at the long term. They are minded to introduce this. They are minded to tell the police. A lot of the police aren't keen, but they are minded to tell the police to reveal more details, more information about suspects. And do you think they should do it or not?
Yeah. But we could always do it the way around and say, let's reveal a lot more information and put a lot more data and stories around convictions and try and tone down. But
you can't do that unless you've got your own media outlets.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
So I'm pushing you for an answer. In the world we inhabit, with the media we have and the various dishonest and disingenuous commentators and editors and columnists and politicians, should the government reveal or tell the police to reveal more details about suspects?
And the answer is, I don't know.
No, I don't know either.
I really don't know.
It's such a weird one. And no one has challenged the analysis yet. No one has challenged the, and you're not either, the idea that this is what the tension is between the people who think that the facts will reduce the likelihood of violence and the people who think that they'll be able to use the, quotes, facts, end quotes, to increase the likelihood of violence. Those are the two camps here. Pick a side. Thank you, Jane. From Jane to Jen in Attleborough. Jen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Jane.
At first when I found out that Starmer had said that he was going to do this, and the announcement I heard was alongside Farage's name, so I was quite shocked.
Yes.
But then I gave my head a wobble and realised the reason why Starmer wanted it. Mm. And I'm a person that needs facts. And last week when you gave out that 1,311 statistic, it was amazing because it gives people who want that balance and to be able to have a good conversation about what's going on out there, it gives us information to use. I met somebody on holiday 2 weeks ago that came from Northern Ireland, and he said, in all seriousness to me, that they didn't have any rape in Northern Ireland. And I said to him, that can't be the case. So yeah. I Googled it, and I said to him, I'm really sorry, but have a look at this. And what the article I pulled up was showing that rape statistics are going up in Northern Ireland, and he looked at me square in the face and said, yes, but that's the immigrants. Now,
Wow.
For people like him, he's so far down the rabbit hole and he's been gaslit. I don't know what press he's reading. I don't think there's much hope for people like him. But I think that by providing a balance and providing the data, the loudest voices are being heard at the moment and the actual facts aren't out there. And I think that it might be possible to get through to some of the people who've been gaslit, but not all of them.
And is that better than nothing? Because you're going to... Well, because...
Yes.
Well, is it... And is it... I mean, we're working on the presumption that it would reduce the likelihood of violence. I think,
Yes.
or maybe we're not. Maybe that's a red herring. It will reduce the level of misinformation being believed. It will turn down the temperature among perfectly ordinary people who wouldn't set fire to a hotel or wouldn't set fire to asylum seeker accommodation in a million years. But it would still be worth doing.
I absolutely think so. I can't see what harm it would do. And I think if we can change and get to some of the people's minds who've been gaslit, and you said something a minute ago that I was going to say that, out of 100, if I said to this guy I met last week on holiday, that only one out of that 1,311, he'd say, well, one is too many, because they're not focusing on the crime anymore. They're focusing on the race of the person.
Yeah, obviously, and increasingly explicitly.
Yes.
And I mean, the fella you bumped into on holiday almost proving that point for you is I don't really care. And also the strange thing that people are increasingly emboldened to say is that they care more about a crime according to the status of the culprit or the person that's accused of it. The idea that if someone is attacked, it's worse. Or if someone is, God forbid, a victim of sexual assault or rape, it's somehow worse if the offender fits into a demographic I don't like than it would be if it fits into a demographic I do like. I find that...
Yes, because they don't belong here, James. We belong here.
That's the line they take. And we, I mean, a brilliant caller suggested this to me a couple of weeks ago, is that you even have, when you look at the instances of violence, and you look at the records of some of the people jailed during the Farage riots last summer, they would probably fit into the category that a brilliant caller described a couple of weeks ago as not giving a monkeys about women, but just thinking that there are women, so we can be violent towards them or we can abuse them, but my goodness me, these incomers can't. And that's a hideous mindset, but one that is increasingly being mainstreamed almost, I think.
I just wish these conversations would be held more on other media, James. You talk about it all the time. And, I listen to you all the time. And I heard you yesterday and last week. And it's just that this needs to get out there.
And that's where you find yourself wondering why people don't. I mean, it's proven to be just as engaging or just as popular as doing the opposite, pretending that every brown person in the country is a criminal or giving Nigel Farage a little massage every time he comes into the studio. There's no commercial reason to do it. You have to wonder whether the leanings of the people doing it tally more with the people looking for more violence than they do with the people praying that there isn't any, and that we all end up being a little bit more measured and a little bit more honest.
It was from what you were talking about earlier. I wanted to kind of take it back a little bit because I think we've got to a point where there has been an agenda of certain political figures to other people, by othering people and by dehumanising people.
Yeah.
Therefore, we see them differently. I was saying to your producer that myself and my husband have fostered 3 young asylum seekers from age 14. So if anybody comes at me and says, well, you wouldn't have them in your house, yes, I would. Nothing happened. They were polite. We keep in touch with them. They're amazing. We've also worked with asylum seekers and refugees, and I think what has happened, people don't see the emotion and the psychology. They don't see them as people. And because of that, there's no point in attacking people on the right and saying you're stupid, you're this, that, and the other. It's gone past that.
Yes.
There was just no point to it. You need to come at it from an emotional angle. And the people that I've seen protesting at these hotels, and we supported a lot of people in hotels. We started working with asylum seekers back in 2015 when lots of Syrian families came over. And I see all of these things in the news, and I know these things aren't true, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I say anything on social media. People don't want to know. They'll just laugh. It's gone past all of that. So I think we need to put some kind of emotional connection.
It's the second part. So stories, but the problem with that, and I'm only interrupting you, partly because I find it very hard not to, but on this occasion we are quite tight for the news.
Sure.
The power of the story is going to be determined in large part by the size of the platform, and where will you hear those stories? That's the problem, isn't it? If God forbid the young lads that you looked after had hurt you or stolen from you, it would be headline news. But the fact that they were lovely and you continue to be close and keep tabs on each other, and they presumably feel a great debt of gratitude to you, that's dog bites man.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
If something did happen, of course, it would be. But I think I just want to put it out there that these are people. These are people, and by dehumanising, othering, it makes it so easy.
And we never focus on the whiteness of a suspect with the same prominence that we do on other ethnicities, which is part of the othering process, the low-level othering, the entry-level othering that you describe. And this isn't a criticism by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know, and you may not know either, whether you are supportive or unsupportive of the idea under discussion, the idea of giving the public more on the background of suspects.
I spoke to your producer about this when she asked me, and my response was, what agenda is it feeding into? How did we get to this point that we need to now know that? Who wants to know this? Because it seems to have been... Well, it's
lies, isn't it, about two-tier justice, or about the criminal justice system being so... And that takes us back to the original problem, is that can you actually appease people who are in the business of disseminating dangerous and insightful lies?
Exactly, and it's so difficult. We're so up against it, and it's hard work, and it's heartbreaking. I don't know where we go from here, but
No, that's fine.
I hoped... Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say I just wish that people would think more about things instead of just... I know...
No, me too. I'm laughing affectionately and in full agreement. I hope it came across that way on the phone. I'm laughing wistfully, almost. If people would just think more about things. Those are 2 points of the discussion. An earlier caller saying, it was Andrew in Penzance, actually, a nice representation for East Anglia and for Cornwall today in the first hour, just saying that I don't think he used the word naive, but expecting facts to do more work than they're capable of doing. And Sarah mustering under my standard on the idea that if only people would think more, they wouldn't behave in the ways that they behave.